Could there possibly be internet in such a place? Kylie inquired, her voice heavy with disappointment as she gazed through the window at the undulating fields dotted with grazing cows and scattered hay bales. Her mother, Tyra McFadden, glanced up from the glow of her smartphone and followed Kylie's gaze outside. "Of course, honey. I've double-checked it," she reassured Kylie, trying to lift her spirits. "There's a top-notch school there. They've just given it a fresh look, and it's not just about looks. Their performance numbers are impressive, too. Quality education is assured." Tyra corrected Kylie gently with a smile. "And it's not a village, dear. It may be compact, but it's a town nonetheless." "Cheer up, my little hedgehog," she urged Kylie, offering a warm smile. "I promise you'll find this place enjoyable." A compassionate child at heart, Kylie managed to smile back at her mother. Understanding her worries about their unforeseen situation, she knew her mom was equally anxious about the abrupt changes they were facing. However, leaving behind her cherished friends, adored schoolmates, and the vibrant city life for a far-flung small town was a bitter pill to swallow for Kylie. Much to Kylie's surprise, the actual picture of the town differed from her grim expectations. It turned out to be a pleasant surprise. Pines, while small, was equipped with all the essentials for a cozy life. The McFadden's future residence was quite delightful. It was a quaint small dwelling, perfect for the two of them. Kylie instantly picked out her room, her spirits lifted slightly. She was accustomed to sharing a room with her mother, often sleeping in the same bed. Now having her own personal space seemed like a small but significant upgrade. Tyra felt a sense of contentment for her daughter. She was determined to provide Kylie with everything she had been denied in her own childhood. After all, Tyra had grown up in an environment of scarcity. She was an orphan, raised in a children's home that closely mirrored the harsh depictions seen in movies. Sparse meals, harsh caregivers, and confrontational peers formed the backdrop of her early life. As a petite, unusually thin girl, Tyra was often overlooked by prospective parents who came looking to adopt. She was not the type to put on a sweet smile or show overt affection to strangers, who in her view selected a child as one might choose a puppy from a litter. As a result, she watched as one by one her contemporaries and other children, both younger and older, left the shelter with their new families while she remained behind. Tyra had never known her birth parents or what it felt like to live in a familial home. However, she harbored a firm belief that motherhood should be filled with warmth, understanding, kindness, and generosity, a quality embodied by one individual in the orphanage. Mrs. Maria Deason. Mrs. Deason was the janitor at the children's home. Her deep love for children and a sense of compassion for their plight was evident in her actions. She took joy in her job despite its hardships, as it allowed her to interact with the children. It was this love for children that likely kept her at the orphanage for years. Tyra, a reticent and melancholic child who often wore the mark of rejection on her face, caught Mrs. Deason's attention. She took it upon herself to shower little Tyra with special affection. She would gently engage Tyra in conversation, even if it meant she asked and answered her own questions, given Tyra's initial tendency to respond with silence and averted eyes. One day, a small but significant incident whirled Mrs. Deason's heart. It wasn't a breakthrough in communication with Tyra, but something even more touching. After mopping the hallway floor, Mrs. Deason turned to fetch her vacuum cleaner, only to find it missing from its usual spot. Confused, she retracted her steps, thinking she might have left it in her room, only to find Tyra unraveling its cord, ready to plug it in. Mrs. Deason watched from the shadows of the hallway as Tyra switched on the vacuum and began cleaning the carpet in the office. Mrs. Deason's heart swelled with worms and her lips curved into a satisfied smile. This act of voluntary help from Tyra was a reward in itself. Before long, Tyra found her voice around Mrs. Deason. She became the janitor's shadow, helping her with chores while inundating her with questions, to which Mrs. Deason always had patient responses. One day, Tyra posed the question to Mrs. Deason, "Do you have a family of your own?" Mrs. Deason paused at the question, glanced down and looked at Tyra, her face breaking into a warm smile. She took a moment before replying, "Indeed, I do. You, my dear, and all these children. You are my wonderful, sweet family." Her words left Tyra blushing, a delighted grin spreading across her face. Tyra cherished these heartwarming words, seeing Mrs. Dyson as a role model. Deep down, she yearned for Mrs. Dyson to officially adopt her, to be her mother in more than just spirit. However, she never had the courage to voice this desire. Despite Mrs. Dyson's heartfelt wish to adopt Tyra, a legal hurdle made it impossible. As a non-citizen, she wasn't qualified to adopt, and her immigration status showed no signs of changing anytime soon. Years passed, and Tyra blossomed in the same challenging circumstances. Influenced by Mrs. Dyson's unwavering kindness and strength, she grew into a beautiful, fair, compassionate and intelligent young woman with a burning aspiration to become a doctor. Upon graduating high school, Tyra earned a spot at a prestigious university. She excelled in her studies, graduating with honors. With her academic credentials, she could have easily secured a position in a top-tier medical facility. However, destiny had other plans. As her college years drew to a close, Tyra met Aaron. She fell deeply in love with him, a love that resulted in an unexpected pregnancy. Overwhelmed and scared, Tyra spent countless nights crying. She couldn't bear the thought of ending the pregnancy, yet she felt ill-prepared to handle the responsibilities of motherhood. Aaron, sensing her turmoil, comforted her. He knelt down and, amidst her tears and confusion, proposed marriage. "My darling, I assure you we will overcome this," Aaron pledged, pulling her into a tender embrace. But his promise was abruptly shattered when he passed away in a devastating accident 6 months later. One evening, Tyra reached out to Aaron, alarmed by a sudden bout of severe illness. She was feeling nauseous, with sharp pains gnawing at her stomach. Aaron vowed to rush over immediately, while Tyra resolved to call a doctor if her condition worsened. Thankfully, her health improved, but Aaron never arrived. He had been speeding to reach her when he met with a fatal accident. Their wedding plans were cruelly snuffed out. After Aaron's funeral, his estranged sister Lillian believed it was unjust for his estate to be inherited by a woman she hardly knew, especially while she was crammed into her parents' house. Consequently, Tyra, who had been residing in Aaron's apartment, was heartlessly evicted. Even Aaron's parents, who had initially welcomed their relationship, coldly turned their backs on Tyra and her unborn child. In a fit of grief, Tyra's would-be mother-in-law lashed out. "You meant nothing to Aaron. And who knows whose child you're carrying? Maybe it isn't even his. You were probably scheming to seize his properties," she railed, her voice shrill. "His death is on you. He sped because he was rushing to you. You are the reason he's gone. Leave." These words pierced Tyra's heart. As she mourned the loss of her lover, she shouldered guilt for the tragedy, even though she was blameless. The tremendous stress triggered an early labor, and Tyra gave birth to a baby girl. Despite her premature birth, the child proved resilient. Life continued its course. Tyra found employment as a nurse at the local hospital, juggling her responsibilities between raising Kylie and her demanding job. She earned just enough to scrape by. At the hospital, Tyra's nurturing and caring nature resonated with everyone, particularly with an older doctor, Vince Abbott. They formed a bond akin to a father-daughter relationship. Tyra's dedicated work ethic and compassionate demeanor towards patients and co-workers drew Dr. Abbott's attention. He appreciated her not only as an exceptional professional, but also as a trustworthy assistant and an engaging conversationalist. Vince's wife, Chloe, frequently visited the hospital and also grew fond of the young, beautiful, and dedicated nurse. The Abbotts were aware of Tyra's challenges. Despite his offers of assistance, Tyra consistently declined, feeling too mortified to accept help. She never wanted to impose her struggles on others, choosing to keep her life as private as possible. "She reminds me of you when you were young, especially her commitment to work," Mrs. Abbott once shared with her husband. One evening as Tyra hurried home, she unexpectedly crossed paths with Chloe in the hospital corridor. "Oh, hello, dear. I was actually on my way to see you," Chloe greeted her. "Good evening, Mrs. Abbott. It's nice to see you. How can I assist you?" Tyra responded with a bright smile. "It's nothing urgent, sweetheart. I was hoping to invite myself over to your place for a spot of tea. I've been urging Vincent to arrange a meeting with your little girl. I've brought her some fun things. I have a granddaughter of the same age, you know. I thought it might be nice for them to meet." Tyra hesitated, caught off guard by the unexpected proposal. Fearing her pause might be misunderstood, she hesitantly admitted that she felt somewhat uncomfortable about inviting Chloe over. After all, she lived in a humble rental apartment in a less desirable part of town, and her living conditions were far from ideal. "Oh dear, that's completely fine. You don't need to feel embarrassed at all. I completely understand. Vincent and I have been in your shoes before," Chloe said, pausing before hinting over a box filled with books and topped with a chocolate bar. "This is for Kylie. Give her a hug from Grandma Chloe, okay?" "That's incredibly thoughtful of you, Mrs. Abbott. I surely will. Thank you so much," Tyra responded gratefully. That night, Chloe went home and initiated a specific conversation with her husband, Vince. He was pleasantly surprised to find that his wife was contemplating the same idea he had in mind. The next day at work, Vince sought out Tyra during a quiet moment. "Listen, dear," he started, sitting down in the patient's chair with a smile. "I have an intriguing offer that might interest you." "Mr. Vince, just to be clear, I've been considering not taking on any additional shifts," she quickly clarified. "I mean, you're already being too generous to me." Vince chuckled and shook his head. He had been arranging extra shifts for Tyra to earn more and had been bestowing her with generous hard work bonuses. "No, Tyra, this isn't about shifts at all. Chloe and I have discussed your situation and we'd like to assist you in a different way." Tyra raised her eyebrows in surprise, her gaze fixed on the doctor with keen interest. "Mr. Abbott, you've already done so much. I can't fathom how I'll ever be able to repay you." "You don't have to worry about repayment, all right? Just accept our help, no strings attached. Now about the proposal. Chloe and I own a cozy little house in a small town named Pines. It's been standing empty. We occasionally visit to maintain it and perform necessary repairs. We've never considered selling it since that house holds countless memories of my childhood." Vince began his explanation. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Abbott?" Tyra asked, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. "Well, as it turns out, the director of a private clinic in Pines happens to be a good friend of mine. Would you consider if I recommend you? He's searching for dedicated professionals like you, skilled and dependable in their field. They pay quite handsomely there, I might add. And you and your daughter can live in our house. You'd have rent-free living and would be relieved knowing the house is cared for. Please think it over. I understand your current struggles," he suggested before leaving. Tyra turned her gaze aside, picturing the dreary condition of the apartment she shared with her daughter. Having her own home and lending her dream job seemed like something straight out of a fairy tale. A week later, Tyra and her daughter Kylie packed their suitcases and prepared to relocate to Pines. Once they had finished packing, a car arrived to take them to their new home, courtesy of Mr. Abbott's assistant. This assistant, Colton, turned out to be a delightful person, and throughout the long journey to Pines, he engaged Tyra and Kylie in captivating conversation. He made the lengthy trip seem like no time at all, with his entertaining tales and humorous jokes, often leading to hearty laughter from the passengers. Upon their arrival in Pines, Colton helped with their luggage and gave them a tour of the house, as though he was familiar with the place. After sharing a cup of coffee and friendly chat, he said his goodbyes, assuring them to reach out if they needed anything. And so their new life began. At first, everything went splendidly. Tyra was thrilled with her surroundings. The sky seemed a brighter blue, the sun more radiant, and the air held a sweetness that made her inhale deeply every time she stepped outside. Her work was also going well, with a friendly team and the typical medical concerns keeping her busy. However, it wasn't long before they faced new challenges, and this time they came from an unexpected place, Kylie's school. Kylie's first day at her new school was filled with nerves and anticipation. As her mother skillfully braided her hair into a neat French braid, Kylie fidgeted on her low seat, barely able to contain her anxiety. When they arrived at the imposing school building, she could feel her cheeks heating up and her palms becoming clammy, forcing her to constantly wipe them on her skirt. Kylie had just celebrated her 12th birthday. She had learned to be self-reliant at a young age. She completed her homework independently, never requiring her mother's constant attention, and tidied her belongings all by herself. Overall, Kylie was a considerate and pleasant girl who never created any troubles for her mother. She was sincere and kept no secrets from her mother, a dynamic that held until she entered 7th grade. Kylie was so anxious about her first day at the new school that she watched several movies about new kids on the block. Unfortunately, the beginning was always rocky in these films. While the endings often ended happily, with the new girl finding love with a popular jock or undergoing a transformation and making friends, Kylie didn't want to experience those initial tribulations. However, life imitated art in Kylie's case. She was a stunning girl with delicate braids, captivating blue eyes, and porcelain-like skin, making her stand out like a princess. The local girls saw her as a competition and instantly felt threatened. But it wasn't just jealousy of the girls that sparked the bullying. Kylie soon realized that children could indeed be cruel. She had naively thought that bullies only targeted kids who had apparent weaknesses. Unfortunately, Kylie faced unkindness because she was an outsider who hailed from the city and was academically more advanced. During her first literature class, the teacher asked about the syllabus covered at her previous school. Standing up and blushing under the gaze of her classmates, Kylie began to explain. It turned out her previous curriculum was considerably advanced compared to the current one. Kylie unwittingly committed a faux pas by voicing this observation, which didn't sit well with the local students. In that moment, a girl named Kate, who sat behind Kylie and was already feeling envious of the new, beautiful, and intelligent girl, grumbled under her breath. "So you're implying we're dumb and lacking behind?" She rolled her eyes dismissively. "Apparently, we don't meet your high standards." "How fortunate we are," the teacher responded with a smile, unwittingly stoking the existing tensions. "We have been blessed with such a bright and attractive girl. Look to her as an example, children. Especially you, Drew." The class chuckled, casting glances towards the boy in the back row. Drew's face clouded over instantly, throwing a resentful glare at the golden-haired head of the newcomer. From that point onwards, Drew Higgins took an instant dislike to Kylie. Unfortunately for Kylie, Drew was the unofficial leader of the class and a known troublemaker, meaning his opinion carried significant influence. At Drew's signal, the class descended on Kylie like a pack of trained hounds. They persistently tugged at her braids, voiced their groundless complaints, and were generally unkind. "Look at you, city star," Drew sneered, aiming a spit at Kylie's shoes and just missing them. "You think you can just come here and act superior? Our school curriculum is too slow for dummies like us, and a little know-it-all like you is way ahead, huh? Maybe you should join a special class for smarty pants. Here, we're all normal." "I didn't say that," Kylie protested, but her plea fell on deaf ears. The verbal onslaught escalated to physical bullying, with pushing, shoving, and even the destruction of Kylie's notebooks. Afraid of worrying her mother, Kylie told her she had lost them. Busy acclimating to her new job, Tyra didn't notice the sadness lurking in her daughter's eyes, and Kylie, on her part, tried her best to conceal her distress. After enduring 2 months of relentless bullying, Kylie began feigning illnesses. A sore throat, even though Tyra as a nurse could find no sign of inflammation, a morning fever, stomach aches. Tyra was left baffled, unable to understand her daughter's health deterioration and the appearance of mysterious ailments. The truth was revealed unintentionally one morning when they were visited by Colton, Mr. Vince Abbott's assistant, who often checked in on them. In the beginning, Colton visited primarily to gain insights about raising a daughter, as he himself was a single dad following a divorce. As time passed, he began to bring items that were hard to find in the small town. Eventually, both Tyra and Kylie started to look forward to his visits and would often invite him over themselves. One morning, as Tyra was about to leave for work, she gave Kylie a thermometer, instructing her to take her temperature. As she left the room, she inadvertently left the door ajar. Colton, intending to ask about Kylie's health, approached the room intending to knock, but halted in his tracks when he saw Kylie through the partially open door, attempting to heat the thermometer with a cup of hot tea. "Hello, Kylie," he said gently, stepping into the room. "Apologies for not knocking." The door was open. Caught off guard, Kylie's hand jolted, causing the teacup to tilt and spill its hot contents onto the bed. Colton and Tyra, who had rushed back into the room at the sound of the commotion, immediately rushed to Kylie's aid, concerned she might have scalded herself. Once they ensured she was unharmed, they sat down beside her, and Colton, exchanging a meaningful glance with Tyra, softly asked Kylie a question. "Why did you lie, Kylie? Don't be scared. We promise you won't get in trouble." Initially, Kylie remained silent, her lips pressed tightly together, but as her eyes welled up with tears, she threw her arms around her mother's neck and amidst heartbreaking sobs, shared her ordeal. "I can't go to school anymore. Nobody there likes me. They all bully me. During gym class, they push me so hard that I feel and scrape my knees. They hide my stuff, throw it in the trash, claiming that being a city girl, I can always buy new ones. They rip up my notebooks, glue my textbooks together. No matter what I do, they just laugh at me. I can't even participate in class discussions. It only makes them angrier." After hearing Kylie's painful revelation, Tyra allowed her to stay home. She dialed a clinic to inform them that she'd be late, then hurriedly set off for the school. Although Colton offered to accompany her, she declined his offer, choosing to handle the situation on her own. The school's principal wasn't present that day, so instead Tyra was greeted by a school counselor. After listening to Tyra's concern, the middle-aged counselor, pausing occasionally to nibble on her cookies, took it upon herself to expound on the complexities of adolescence. "Your daughter is entering a challenging phase," she began. "She is experiencing new interests, trying to make friends, find her place, even perhaps engaging in some early romantic dynamics. I believe she might be perceiving her classmates' behavior towards her a bit too intensely," she concluded casually. "I will certainly have a word with the students," she continued. "But Kylie needs to find her own way into the social fabric of school. It's all part of growing up, wouldn't you agree?" Tyra remained resolute. "I want her to have a happy childhood," she insisted. "She shouldn't have to endure her classmates' cruel pranks just because she happens to excel in her studies." Life in Pines was starting to present its own challenges for Tyra as well. As a young, attractive single woman, she didn't show much interest in the local social scene or the men who inhabited it. However, the women in town quickly began to view her as a threat. In a town like Pines, where everybody knew everybody, even the smallest incidents were quickly turned into gossip fodder. With Tyra, the city woman who'd moved to the countryside, the rumors ran wild. "Who knows what city women are like?" Tyra's two-door-down neighbor, Tabitha, remarked one day, popping a piece of candy into her mouth. "She's probably here to find a father for her child. She gave birth to a kid from who knows where, and now she's strutting around in heels, flashing her smiles at everyone." Unsurprisingly, this idle chatter and rumor-mongering trickled down to the children, adding to Kylie's torment. "Your mom is a flirt. They say she wears short skirts to work and only attends to male patients." Her classmates began to taunt her. Small and soft-spoken Kylie, normally gentle in her demeanor, couldn't hold back her pent-up fury any longer. She found herself in a scuffle for the first time ever. The troublemakers didn't appreciate her defiance, but it gave them the impetus for a new, more vicious prank. During the following class, Vicky surreptitiously placed chewing gum in Kylie's hair. Fortunately, Kylie detected it quickly and was able to remove the sticky pink glob. However, this incident sparked a cruel idea in Drew's mind. After school, Drew and his gang cornered Kylie and proceeded to douse her hair with glue. When Tyra arrived home, she was met with a dreadful sight. Kylie was in the bathroom sobbing. Her beautiful long hair, which she had tried to cleanse with shampoo, was tangled and matted. The right side of her head was coated with glue extending almost to the roots. Her consoled, distraught daughter and took her to a hair salon. The hairdresser, a sympathetic woman, understood immediately. She gazed into Kylie's teary eyes and flashed a comforting smile. "We'll give you a trendy haircut that will have everyone green with envy," she promised. Kylie merely sniffled and averted her gaze from her reflection in the mirror. She didn't want to incite envy, aware that it could potentially make things worse. The stylist didn't disappoint. She preserved the length of Kylie's hair on one side while buzzing the other side to the scalp. However, when Kylie saw her reflection, she gasped. The drastic haircut was a surprise. "Mom, I look like a rock star." Kylie chuckled. Tyra, fighting back tears, nodded her approval. Absolutely, sweetie. You look stunning. This new style really suits you. She planted a kiss on her daughter's hand. Your hair will grow back, Kylie. That evening, after wishing Kylie good night, Tyra retreated to her own room and finally gave in to her tears. She called the one person she could confide in, the one person to whom she felt comfortable revealing her vulnerability, Colton. Why, oh why are people so harsh towards us here? What have we done to deserve this? Tyra lamented into the phone, her voice crackling with emotion. Colton, on the other side, offered his concern and support. He was currently out of town for work, but promised to rush to her side as soon as he returned. He cautioned her against making any hasty decisions before he could be there with her. Yet, the following day, Tyra returned to the school. This time she was determined to meet with the principal, even if she had to wait in his office for over an hour. When the man finally arrived and heard her grievances, he responded with a shrug. You realize your daughter needs to learn social skills, don't you? He argued. Do you plan to guide her through life forever? She's not going to get along with every professor in college or every boss in her future workplace. This is something you should recognize and accept. But this isn't about mere dislike. They're tormenting her. They dumped glue in her hair, right here at your school. Tyra's voice rose with indignation. Drew Higgins was the ringleader. The principal squirmed in a seat, visibly uncomfortable. I'm sorry to hear this, but children can play roughly. They might not have understood the consequences. He deflected. Do you genuinely believe that this response is appropriate, given your role as principal? Tyra's anger flared even brighter. Seeing her reaction, the principal decided to retaliate with an offensive strategy. His tone hardened. Don't blow things out of proportion, he advised dismissively. I guess the rumors about you were true. Since you came from the big city, you believe everyone should bend over backwards for you. Let me tell you, we have no patience for dramatic and unreasonable people here. Tyra was stunned by his words. Her eyes swept across the principal's desk, landing on a tube of glue. Without giving it a second thought, she snatched it up before he could react and emptied its contents onto his head. What on earth are you doing, you crazy woman? He shrieked, leaping from his seat. I was brought up by teachers just like you. Besides, it seems that hysterical people are allowed such liberties, right? How do you like it now? It's amusing, isn't it? She tossed the empty tube onto his desk and added, You only have regular glue in your hair. A bit of water and alcohol at worst should rinse it out. My daughter wasn't so fortunate. A silent standoff ensued, the air heavy with tension. The mother and the principal locked gazes, neither backing down. Just then, the schoolyard bully, the main instigator of Kylie's misery, barged into the office without knocking. Tyra immediately recognized him. He was the same boy she had previously caught smoking a dubious substance around the corner. Before she could say a word, the sticky-haired principal snapped out of his daze, morphing from a refined school administrator into a crass, offensive man, slinging slurs and threats at Tyra. Understanding that reasoning with such an individual was futile, Tyra declared on her way out of the office. And don't think this is the end of it, his shrill tirade echoed behind her as she left. The remainder of Tyra's day was mired in gloom. It seemed inevitable that she would have to return to the city. She resolved to remove her daughter from this environment. What good could come from a school where teachers, let alone the principal, exhibited such a lack of discipline? Her brooding thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the clinic door. There in the doorway stood a familiar dark-colored car and a tall figure holding a bouquet of flowers. She eagerly ran towards Colton, feeling a surge of joy at seeing him. Their relationship had clearly evolved from friendship into something more profound. On the drive home, Tyra recounted the events of her tumultuous day. Colton found the scene she had caused in the principal's office particularly amusing. It does sound quite hilarious, she conceded with a chuckle, but it appears as if I've conclusively ended our tranquil life in Pines. Not to mention jeopardized Kylie's education here, but I can't bear the thought of leaving her in that place either. Hey, now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Colton responded, a playful grin lighting up his face. Everything's gonna be okay. Just trust me on this. And remember, we've got the weekend ahead of us. Tyra threw him a quizzical look. but he clearly wasn't going to divulge his plans. As they journeyed, she pondered over what Colton could possibly have up his sleeve and how he intended to support her. Yes, he was a wonderful, considered man, but his role as Mr. Abbott's aide wasn't a magic cure-all for her issues. Upon reaching home, Kylie and a surprise visitor were eagerly waiting for them, a petite, dark-haired girl who looked like a miniature version of Colton. "Tyra, I brought my daughter along today, and as you can see, I took the liberty of dropping my little Lisa off at your place before picking you up." "I hope that's all right with you," Colton said. Seeing Tyra's broad smile, he continued more assertively, "Please meet my little troublemaker, Lisa." Kylie and Lisa hit it off immediately. They spent a delightful evening enjoying a scrumptious dinner and engaging in easy chatter. Colton and Lisa invited the McFaddens to accompany them to the city the following day, emphasizing that Kylie needed some time off to unwind after her recent ordeal. "Also, my folks have invited us over for dinner," Colton mentioned casually to Tyra. He laughed and added, "They're quite keen on meeting the person who's got me," in their words, prancing around the house with the goofy grin of a love-struck fool. The upcoming Saturday seemed set for a host of activities, and it certainly didn't disappoint. After an exhilarating day filled with shopping, movie watching, leisurely walks in the park, and museum visits, the group finally reached the grand, picturesque house. Upon laying eyes on the couple who came to greet them at the entrance, Tyra was taken aback. At first she thought Colton had also invited his boss's family. However, the couple's warm welcome left her utterly astounded. "Hello, Tyra, it's been a while." Tyra's former boss greeted her, his gaze shifting to the lovely blonde girl by her side. "And who's this charming young lady? Could this be the famous Kylie?" Kylie didn't hesitate and promptly extended her hand to the man in an endearingly formal manner. "Dear, it's so wonderful to see you again." Chloe embraced Tyra warmly. She cast a reproachful glance at Colton. "It seems my son finally decided to bring you over. I had to persuade him endlessly." A puzzled Tyra courteously returned their greetings while Kylie was at ease in the welcoming atmosphere. "Apologies for not telling you sooner," Colton confided to Tyra as they sat on a bench in the garden after dinner. "My father didn't want you to feel uncomfortable, so he introduced me as his assistant. Afterwards, we never found the right moment to reveal the truth." "Wow, that's quite the surprise, but it's perfectly fine." The woman smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Unfortunate to have met your parents. They are such delightful people, and you're incredibly lucky to have them." Colton returned her gaze, feeling a pang of unease. He was well aware that Tyra didn't have her own parents. He hesitated briefly and responded, "Yes, very fortunate. You know what, Colton?" Tyra suddenly perked up. "There is one person who would absolutely love to be here today, and who might that be?" "It's my mom." Taken aback, Colton's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He remained silent for a beat, momentarily at a loss for words. "Do you think you could drive me somewhere right now?" Tyra asked. "Right now?" "Yes, right now," Tyra confirmed as she dialed a number on her phone. Without any further ado, the couple set off towards the address of someone very special to Tyra. After a gentle knock, the door swung open to reveal a surprised elderly woman. "Hello, Mrs. Deason," Tyra greeted warmly, planting a soft kiss on the woman's cheek. "Apologies for the late hour. I was just too excited to wait until morning." She shared the knowing look with her companion and introduced, "Colton, meet my mom." At Tyra's words, Mrs. Dyson's quiet gray world shattered, giving way to a vibrant and colorful reality. She had yearned for this moment her entire life. Overwhelmed with emotion, she broke down into tears and held Tyra in a long, tight embrace. After a while, she raised her eyes to meet Colton's gaze and smiled warmly. "Pleasure to meet you, young man. You are truly fortunate." "You're the second person to tell me that today." "Thank you," Colton responded sincerely. The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur of reminiscing, shared tears, and laughter. It was an extraordinary weekend in Tyra's life, one filled with such happiness that the looming Monday no longer seemed so foreboding. Yet the new week began not quite as Tyra had anticipated. In the morning, Kylie went to school, carrying with her the anxiety of potential bullying. Tyra couldn't help but worry for her daughter. However, the doctor's somber thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. In the doorway appeared the pale face of a nurse. "Doctor, there is a child in critical condition. It's unclear. Seems like some sort of poisoning." Tyra instantly pushed aside her worries and sprang into action. On the examination table lay a boy in a semi-conscious state. Upon closer inspection, she recognized the ashen-faced boy as Jurek Higgins. Beside him, a woman. Presumably his mother was in a fit of hysteria. The strong lingering smell on the boy's clothes indicated that the poisoning had occurred due to something he had smoked. Unfazed, Dr. McFadden swiftly and professionally began to administer treatment to the boy. Half an hour later, Drew was safely tucked in a hospital bed, fast asleep. His life was no longer hanging in the balance. His mother, tear-streaked and grateful, thanked Dr. McFadden profusely. "There is no need for concern. He's going to be all right," Tyra comforted, then gently added, "This might be overstepping my bounds, but I would suggest having a serious talk with him about the risks of unknown substances and untrustworthy companions. The sooner the better." The woman nodded, looking at Tyra as if she had more to say. But Tyra was called away to another patient before she could. Recovering well, Drew returned to school shortly after. Encouraged by his parents, he apologized to Kylie in front of their entire class. Although she might have been reluctant at first, Kylie, being as forgiving and kind-hearted as her mother, did not harbor a resentment towards her classmates. She decided that every challenge brought an opportunity for growth. The unfortunate glue incident led to a chic new hairstyle, and difficult experiences led to new friendships. So she forgave Drew and treated him with kindness. Soon, the rest of the class fell out sued, realizing that Kylie was not the haughty character they'd presumed, but rather the exact opposite. In an attempt to make things right, Drew began to show an interest in getting to know Kylie better, assisting her whenever she faced challenges, and unintentionally improved his character under her influence. Gradually, they evolved from mere acquaintances to close friends. Tyra, too, found her footing in this new environment, Drew's parents eternally grateful to the doctor for saving their son's life. Sincerely apologized for the discomfort the McFaddens had endured due to their son's actions. They pledged to help restore Tyra's unjustly tarnished reputation. Given their standing in the community, their viewpoint influenced many town members. Consequently, the malicious gossip dwindled, eventually quelled by Tyra's kindness and professionalism. Tyra and Kylie had no intention of leaving. They had found their home, their new family in this place. The town was abuzz with anticipation for Tyra and Colton's impending nuptials, an event eagerly awaited not only by their parents but also their friends and newfound sisters. Finally, Tyra had found her share of happiness. After all, life works like a boomerang. What you send into the universe is bound to return to you. Do good, and life will eventually reciprocate in kind.